Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, all over Ohio State football this week with Steve Hellwagon. Catch his work at 247 Sports, Bucknuts, and also as the senior writer for Big Ten Sports. Steve, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great, Mark. What's going on?
Well, you're pretty busy. Basketball team, for good reason, breaking out to get back to the NCAA tournament. Of course, has a 4-13 matchup coming up, and or a 5-12 matchup coming up.
5-12, yeah.
And then could be Gonzaga in that second round, a team that's obviously done damage in the tournament in recent years. But we'll talk a little.
Beating Ohio State previously this year as well, 86-59 back in November.
Ouch.
So, yeah, that's a tough draw for the Buckeyes.
I know Dan Dockich likes Ohio State traveling all the way to the Final Four, but there might be some outside influences there.
Yeah, a little bit of bias, I think, for him. You know, he has been a proud dad throughout all this. He shows up. You know, he's got announcing commitments all over the country with ESPN, but he's probably been at about 60 or 70% of the games and has a radio show in Indianapolis as well. So he's in and out all over the Midwest and all over the country doing games, but has still found time to support his son whenever he can get to a game, home or away. So it's been very impressive to see.
And definitely a fun analyst to listen to if you love college football or college basketball. He'll break it down. Plus, he makes it pretty light and fun. All right, Steve, this spring football session, obviously there's always a concern from the coaching staff in certain areas. As you scan the field and scan the units to get into the minds of Urban Meyer and the rest of the staff, what do you think concerns them? What do you think is first and foremost on their mind to get cleaned up?
Well, I think you lose probably 7 or 8 starters and guys who've been mainstays and 2- and 3-year starters in some case, and JT Barrett 3.5 years at the quarterback position. So I think you start there with the quarterback position. You got to find and identify somebody who can help you win Big Ten games and beat teams like TCU, who they're going to play early in the season with a great defense, help you get into the playoff, help you beat teams in the playoff, because that's basically the goal at Ohio State right now, year in and year out, is to contend and play for the national championship and to win the national championship. So they don't make any bones about it. That's kind of where things are with Ohio State right now. And, of course, you know, the much of the talk there is between Dwayne Haskins, the sophomore, and Joe Burrow, who will be a fourth-year junior this year. Those two guys seem to be the first two guys in line at that all-important position. But that's not the only position across the board. You lost the Remington Award winner at center with Billy Price. You lost your left tackle, Jamarco Jones. You lost your tight end, Marcus Baugh. So right there are 3 or 4 more spots that I don't know if it's keeping Urban Meyer and the offensive coaches up at night, but certainly has got their attention this spring. The way they schedule spring at Ohio State's interesting. They're on spring break right now this whole week. They practiced twice last week, and then on Monday they will start back in with the last 13 practices that they are permitted, and they will run up through the spring game on April the 14th at Ohio Stadium. So that gives you an idea. I would say a little bit disjointed, but that's how they like to do it, is to give the guys a couple practices to get acclimated early, a week off, and then come back and they really get to work here in the next couple of weeks leading up to that spring game. But, yeah, there's all kinds of position battles across the board that I think are really kind of taking the coaching staff and really have their attention this spring.
We've got Steve Hellwagon on board. He's the Big Ten senior writer for 247 Sports. Check out his work at Bucknuts Football and Basketball. Of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel for the best in college football coverage across the board. The audio versions you can catch at Google Play, Podbean, iTunes, and Stitcher. So, Steve, I know that once Mike Weber got healthy last year and he became himself, and J.K. Dobbins was, of course, a dynamic back, that there was much thought, and I certainly saw it in flashes, especially in the Michigan State game, where there was potential to get these two guys in the same backfield. I know that's not the typical set for an Urban Meyer offense to have 2 backs in the backfield, but to get these 2 guys involved where the defense doesn't know what's coming, and I would hope to see that more here in 2018.
Yeah, I think that's a definite possibility, Mark. I think, I go back to the year before in 2016 when they had Curtis Samuel and they put him in the backfield with Mike Weber. And Mike Weber was a great blocker for Curtis Samuel. He led the way for the winning touchdown against Michigan in that big double overtime win that they had that year. They don't want to beat Mike Weber up, though, as a blocker. He's only about 215 pounds, so he's not the biggest guy in the world. Dobbins was just nothing short of phenomenal as a true freshman. And when you think about how he had been injured the year before in high school and had not played only just a few snaps of his senior year in high school, then he came into Ohio State early, got healthy, and when Weber had a hamstring injury, that allowed Dobbins to step in there and take over that tailback position. He rushed for over 1,000 yards. Weber had 1,000 yards the year before, so they're one of the few schools, if any, in the country coming into 2018 who have a pair of guys who have 1,000-yard rushing season under their belt. I'm not sure if anybody else would have something like that. Field, and yet so much more that one or both of those guys can do this coming year. Weber seriously thought about leaving Ohio State to enter into the National Football League after last season, and he did come on the last 3 or 4 games once he was healthy, really made a tremendous difference. But I think right now the coaching staff is looking at ways. I think Dobbins is the one, Weber's the 1A, based on how it kind of appears and what you would think. They're going to look for ways to get them both involved. There'll be plenty of work for both of them with a new quarterback. And the thought that maybe the quarterback, now that Barrett is gone, will not be one of the primary ball carriers, that maybe they'll lay that off onto the running backs in total this year. So I guess we'll have to see how that plays out this upcoming season. But I think you got to be excited about the tandem at running back. Dobbins and Weber, just 2 tremendous backs.
Steve Hellwagon joins us from 247 Sports and Bucknuts, football and basketball coverage from Ohio State and the Big Ten. Steve, we hear the term this time of year, breakout player. Who are going to be the breakout players for 2018? For me, that's a guy that's maybe in obscurity, who didn't get a whole lot of playing time. Maybe he was a special teams guy, and he needs to fill a role. He needs to step up and be a starter. Or maybe that's a guy that's a really good player who has the potential to be a star. So for you, breakout players, who would you like to see or think Ohio State needs to be a breakout player this year?
I think there's a few of them. I think if you look at this roster, Demario McCall is a guy who only played a couple of games last season and will apparently redshirt and still be a third-year sophomore this year. He's kind of a running back wide receiver hybrid, and I think he's a guy that's got big play potential. He's got tremendous speed when he gets to the perimeter. So I look at him. A couple of the wide receivers, Austin Mack, time has flown by pretty quickly. He's now a junior, third-year guy, and was lightly used as a freshman. Had a few catches last year, and I think just started to scratch the surface of what he's capable of doing. And I think that this is going to be a huge year for him. Benjamin Victor is a big kid. I'm going to make sure I get his height and weight right. I'm on the wrong page. He is 6'4", 200 pounds, and he sticks out in a crowd. He's a guy that they used in the red zone to catch touchdown passes. I think he had 7 touchdown catches, was behind only Johnny Dixon, who had 8. And Victor is a guy, if he can round out his game and make plays all up and down the field, as opposed to just being that red zone specialist, he could be a potential breakout guy as well. So there's 2 or 3 of them right there. On the offensive line, they need somebody to step up at center. And it could be Brady Taylor, who's been kind of in the shadows. He'll be a 5th-year senior. They got Matthew Burrell, who was a blue-chip offensive lineman, a recruit a couple years ago. He'll be a junior, and his time has come to step in there. And possibly even a true freshman, Matthew Jones, coming from New York, is a guy that could be a breakout guy in this regard. He's already there for spring football, and he is a center by trade. So maybe he's the next big center in the what was this line been? It was going back, it was Billy Price, Elfline, Boren, and maybe Corey Lindsley before him. So you've got 3 or 4 guys there in that lineage who've been pretty good at the center position, and the next one, who's going to be next in that line. And one more guy on offense is Rashad Berry. He's a tight end. He'll be a junior this coming year. He got in some games last year behind Marcus Ball and did an outstanding job at times, making big plays with the tight end position. He's physical. He can block as well. They've got a receiving tight end coming in, Jeremy Ruckert from New York, Long Island, New York, Lindenhurst, I believe was his school or his hometown. And he's one of the top tight ends in the country. And so he's going to challenge Rashad Berry for that job, I think, when he arrives this summer. But Berry, to me, is another guy that could be on that list of guys who's on the verge of really making that jump.
All right, Steve, you mentioned Ruckert, one of the very best tight ends in the nation, number 1 across the board from most of the recruiting services. So that'll spin us into 2019's look at recruiting. A couple offensive linemen into the fold in regards to verbal commits. Maybe the commitment list is a little bit slow in coming, but of course the targets are always the best in the nation. Who's got your eye?
Well, they have 2 commitments. Doug Nestor, offensive lineman from West Virginia. He's a national top 60 prospect. He's at Huntington, West Virginia, Spring Valley High School. I think he is a guy that they're going to build around. I think he's probably an offensive tackle at 6'6", 295 pounds. And then the other guy that they just got recently was Ryan Jacoby from Menor High School up in the Cleveland area. 6'5", 270 pound. He's an athletic guy, and he could go in a lot of different directions, could play guard or tackle perhaps for the Buckeyes at that next level. So I look at those 2 guys as kind of cornerstones to that 2019 class, but there are so many great prospects. They had a quarterback by the name of Grant Gunnell recently from Texas who was in for a visit. And he came away very impressed with Ohio State and Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day and Urban Meyer. And he's been offered. He's one of the top quarterback prospects in the country. And he is a guy that the Buckeyes are definitely looking at. And he is very high on Ohio State. So I'm not predicting a verbal commitment today or anytime soon. He's from Texas. But the Buckeyes have done just a tremendous job recruiting Texas in recent years. So maybe they'll have a great shot at him. He is from Houston, Texas, St. Pius X High School. As I want to make sure I get all this right as we go through it, because the issue with Ohio State is that they recruit far and wide, nationwide, and so many key prospects up and down the board for them. So to me, I think you look at it and you just get excited. I guess I think somebody tallied up that they've got 45 or 46 players offered. 20 or 22 of them are in the national top 150. And if they sign 8 or 9 of them, then once again, you're going to have last year's class was number 2 in the country, the 2018 class. You're going to have, again, a top 5 class if they can swing that. But, as you go on down from right here in the Columbus area, there's a player, Zach Harrison from Olentangy Orange High School, 24/7, either the network ranking or the composite ranking, which takes all the different networks into account, has him as the number 1 player in the country, big-time defensive end. And the Buckeyes have had a good pedigree, obviously, defensive end with the Bosa brothers and Sam Hubbard, and perhaps Zach Harrison could be the next guy in that line. He lives about a half hour from the Ohio State campus, and will be interesting to see if the Buckeyes can fend off Penn State and Michigan and some of the other top schools. Alabama, I know, is involved with him as well. But that'll give you an update in a nutshell that a lot's going on. Obviously, one big change this year is 2019 seniors may now take official visits in the spring, which means where the spring game weekend, which will be April 14th at Ohio State, has always been big for unofficial visits for those underclassmen, juniors, and sophomores. The juniors can actually come in and be on campus for the entire weekend for an official visit, and that will continue all the way through the end of May or through graduation. I think, not those guys wouldn't be graduating, but the end of their junior year. There may be a quiet period during the summer. Of course, kids get out to camps, and then, of course, the visits will be ongoing in the fall as things happen in the fall, and kids can now sign right before Christmas time, and that early signing period really accelerates this whole process.
Had a discussion last week with SB Nation on Penn State football, and yeah, they're excited to be in the conversation for Zach Harrison. Don't feel like they've got a great shot, but they're starting to make some inroads, and they've stolen a few from the Buckeyes in recent years. Steve
No doubt.
Hellwagon, 247 Sports, also Bucknuts. He is the senior Big Ten writer there at 247. Please join him for football and basketball, of course, with the Buckeyes on the court later this week in the NCAA tournament. Steve, I'm going to file this one away and make this a little bit of a tease for the folks out there, but maybe past spring practice, maybe not the next 1 or 2 times we talk, but into that dead period of May and June. Got some good questions for you here. Best all-time Ohio State win, the one that really resonates with you. Or if you want to come up with a list of 3 or 5 or whatever comes off the top of your
about
head.
800 or 900 games, so that's kind of hard. I better jot all this down. Best win. I have
Best win for you.
Well, okay. I have dabbled a little bit with doing those kind of all-time lists, and I've got several in mind. And probably the big one that I attended was Miami, the Fiesta Bowl in 2003, because it was their first national championship in 35 years. But hard to beat Alabama a couple of years ago. That was the big team to beat, and the Buckeyes pulled that off. But I will pull that together. Best win. Okay.
I will send you a list. We'll do that.
Okay, do it that way.
And we'll get the folks involved with their questions and comments as we typically do. All right, Steve Hellwagon, senior Big Ten writer, 247 Sports, Bucknuts as well. I got to join him there for the very best in Ohio State football and basketball coverage. Steve, we appreciate you stopping by.
All right, Mark, take care.